By the end of this video, you'll learn how to set up Claude Cowork in the most optimal way as a marketer, or a business owner, or solopreneur running your own marketing. I'll first walk you through two very practical workflows that are probably super useful for a lot of marketing functions. The first workflow will walk you through planning, creating, and executing a sales campaign through Cowork, Notion, and HubSpot, or any other CRM that you're currently using. In the second workflow, we'll do an end-to-end social media campaign workflow. And then I'll show you how to implement a Cowork operating system which understands your brand and remembers your audience, your messaging, all of it living in its persistent memory. And as always, I'll walk you through everything step by step with minimal technical jargon, so you can follow along even if you're completely new to Claude Cowork. Real quick, if you find videos like these useful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really does help a lot. Now let's dive right in. All right, if you're completely new to Claude Cowork, in order to use Claude Cowork, you need two things: Claude Desktop and a Claude Pro subscription. So if you don't already have those, you can actually go to claude.com/download to download Claude Desktop. So this is just an app on your local system, so you can access your project files, not from the cloud, but actually from your local system that you have, which is in your laptop or your computer. And then the second thing that you need is the at least Claude Pro subscription. Of course, you can go for the Claude Max, but if you're just starting out, you might want to try it on Claude Pro first, because you need a Claude Pro plan to be able to use Claude Cowork feature. So go ahead and subscribe to that. It is per month, so you can cancel at any point in time if you like. And once you have Claude Desktop and Claude Pro plan, you essentially could open up Claude from your local system. This is what it's going to look like on the Claude Desktop app. And on the top left-hand corner, you see that you have chat, Cowork, and code. And in this case, we want to focus on Cowork. So if you go over to Cowork, on your left-hand sidebar, you'll see that there are projects, schedule, live artifacts, dispatch, and customize. Now, projects are basically a repository of the particular project that you're working on. So this is where Cowork gets its context from. So any conversation that you have, any memories that you have within that particular project will give Cowork the understanding of what it's doing. So for example, I have a few projects here. I have Paradise Homes Real Estate. I have ABC Sales Outreach. So Paradise Homes Real Estate, for example, could be its own business with its own unique strategic messaging, etc., audience, different type of products. So if I want Cowork to craft an email for Paradise Homes, I wouldn't necessarily just go to a general new task, but I would go inside the project and actually ask it to craft a new email over here, or sales campaign, whatnot, right? So projects work like that. So typically, if you have one company, let's say a marketing department, you might want to create a singular project for that particular department. And for example, I have an Automate with Marc channel. So this is a project for me to help me with research and what my audience could be interested in. So scheduled are basically tasks that you schedule. So we'll see in a little bit, when you actually ask Cowork to do a certain task, you can actually run it as a scheduled task by just asking it to do that. So and it will show up here, which you can actually look into it, and you can actually pause or delete and whatnot. So you can manage those scheduled projects from this particular bar here. And live artifacts are basically any HTML dashboards that you create. It's more for reporting, but also a couple other things if you're doing a proof of concept and stuff like that, you'll go into here. Dispatch is basically new. So essentially what it allows you to do is allows you to access or communicate with Cowork remotely. So if you have your computer on and you're outside with your phone, you can actually use Dispatch to ask Cowork to do a certain task. So it's great because then you don't have to sit in front of your computer and wait for Cowork to complete the task. You can actually use Dispatch to communicate with it. That's it. You do need your computer to be on while you're out. So if your computer goes to sleep or it turns off, it's not going to work, right? That's because all the projects live on your local system, on your system files. And then lastly, customize is where you have the skills and the connectors. And skills, if you're completely new to it, skills is basically just a markdown file. And a markdown file is simply just a text file in fancy format. So here, as you can see, this is a skills file for Canva email banner. So it is just basically a text file describing how you want a certain thing to be done. So it's just like a recipe, right? In my past videos, I've said it's kind of like a recipe for carbonara. So you have a specific way you want your carbonara to be cooked, a certain amount of eggs, a certain amount of salt and stuff like that, how hard you want the pasta to be. So this is basically just dictating that, so that when the AI does a certain task, let's say if I ask it to create an email banner on Canva, it's going to go through the skills and it's going to do it the way that I want it to do. Right, so I would put in best practices and stuff like that. And you can obviously put in as many skills as you want into here. And there's some built-in skills that come with Cowork. And there are two ways to add skills basically, right? So you can add skills by hitting the plus button here, and you can go to browse skills. And there are some skills that are readily available from Anthropic and partners. But if you don't want to do that, you can also create your own skills with Claude, right? So you can tell it you want certain things to run a certain way, and then it will create a specific write-up for that particular skill. Meanwhile, connectors is basically just a bridge between Claude and third-party apps. So apps like Apollo, HubSpot, Notion, Shopify, Salesforce, Canva. These are apps that are commonly used by businesses, and you can connect them. A lot of them already has an official connector from Claude. So for example, if you hit the plus button here, you can browse connectors and you can see there are a lot of apps that you can connect right off the shelf. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you're connected to the apps that you wanted to be able to use, right? So earlier you saw HubSpot connected, but I've just disconnected it and removed it so that I can show you guys how easy it is to connect it. So I'm just going to click on Browse Connectors here and just search for HubSpot, right? This is because HubSpot is already an official connector. And once you hit that, it will pop open an authentication page on your Chrome browser. So what you can do is just click the account that you want it to be associated to and choose account. So here I want to allow everything. So I'm granting everything, okay. And I'm just gonna hit connect app. And it's gonna redirect you back to Claude and then just hit open Claude and it should open up the browser here. And you can see connected to HubSpot. The connection itself differs from apps to apps, obviously, but most part, when you hit the connect button, is going to open up a authentication pop-up on your browser. And if you have your Canva, your app open on that particular browser, it's a simple, easy click and connect, and you're onto the third-party app. So you'll want to do the same with Canva, Notion, all the apps that you want to give it access to. I'm not going to do every single one because it's essentially the same steps. But if you don't find an app that has the readily available connectors, what you can do is also add a custom connector here. So there's an add custom connector, and most tools these days, they already have some form of MCP server stood up. So you can actually grab the MCP URL and just paste it on here. And if you happen to find tools that don't already have an MCP server URL, well, you can use tools like N8N, for example, to build your own MCP server. That's no code. And as long as you can connect it to N8N, then you can connect it to Claude as well. But I'm not going to get too deep into it right here, but just to let you know that that's also a possibility. Okay, so that's just a quick intro on what these functionalities are, but let's go over to project is basically where you want to head to. So let's run our first workflow, right? So just for this to look a little bit real, I actually came up with a fictitious company called slowhourcandle.co. And so this is a luxury candle retail company, a small business somewhere in Brooklyn. So I just have a few files that I dropped into it so that to give it a bit of context. So I have a brand markdown files telling it what Slow Hour Candle is. And then there's some skills that I put in here, Canva email banner skills, which I'll share down in the description below in case you're interested to use that skill as well, which will come in handy when we're using Canva later on. But I've also put in under the marketing images folder a couple of marketing images that I took off the internet of candles. So we're going to use these as the base images that we have. And of course, if you already are a running business, you would have a lot more of these, and you can just drop everything into the file and you should be able to have a better result than what we're doing today here. But just wanted to show you how the workflow all goes together so that it all makes sense. So in this case, I'm assuming that we are using a couple of things, right? So Slow Hour Candle has a CRM on HubSpot, and Notion is what it's using to kind of plan things out. And of course, Canva is the design tool that is using to design assets. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to ask it a very simple, come up with a marketing campaign for a Slow Hour Candle, both email and social media, and create a marketing campaign calendar for Mother's Day on Notion, right? So I'm just going to hit send on that and see what it comes up with. So here's coming back, hey, Mother's Day 2026 in the US already passed May 10th, which Mother's Day should I do this campaign for? Oh yeah, it's already just passed. So let's say, May, okay, next year, right? Who cares, all right? What's the campaign main commercial angle, discount, and gift bundles? All right, we'll go with that. And if you just connect to Notion, and it's the first time it's running operations like this, it's gonna ask for permissions for you to allow this particular task. So you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so it's done coming up with the plan, and here it is the link in Notion. So I'm gonna hit that link and open up Notion on my browser. And there we go, Mother's Day 2027, give her the hour, widest angle, audience, the offer, 15% off, channel mix, shipping, cutoffs, So these are email 1, email 2. So it says, we've been thinking about the people who don't take their hour, the ones who pour the tea and don't sit down with it. Okay, looking pretty good. Marin, well, Marin is the fictitious founder of Slow Candle Co. So, just to be more personal, this email comes, with her sign off, production checklist, So that is actually the email campaigns. And here we see that there's a campaign calendar tagged here. So if I hit the campaign calendar, there's email, IG, post, Instagram, email, So this is a whole calendar for the Mother's Day campaign with the dates, with the copy, hook, everything, right? And so this was pretty good for a first shot. Again, not too much context to the actual brand itself. So the campaign calendar is on Notion now. Now what I wanted to do is, part of the email is the email banner, right? So I'm going to go back to Cowork project now and ask, can you create the appropriate email banners using this particular skill here, which I'll share down the link below too, if you guys want to use it on Canva for email 1 and 2. Right, so what I wanted to do is we already have the copies for email 1 and 2 from the Notion document. So I could take that and push it to HubSpot and essentially can send it out. But we're missing the email banners, right? Because we want the emails to look good, look professional as a marketing email. So I'm going to ask it to create the email banners with Canva. So actually, I like that it's flagging a couple of things here before it creates the banner. Email 1 was spec'd as a plain text letter with no banner. So it was intentional as part of the plan. So since I kind of went ahead with the plan, it's kind of flagging to me, hey, it was supposed to be just a plain email. So let's say, okay, let's just do it for email 2 then. All right, so I'm gonna queue this. As it's working, I can actually queue my response to it as soon as it's done with that, right? So let's see how it's gonna craft the banner for email 2, all right? Because email 1 was supposed to be plain text, it looks more personal, looks more informal. Meanwhile, email 2 is a bit more marketing, professional style. So with Canva, you get this really nice UX, UI visuals on how it's creating the design, and later on it'll pop up here as well. So it's come up with 4 candidates from Canva. So let's see. So that's candidate 1, arts and soy candles, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, doesn't look too bad. It's still working on a couple of things, so I'm not gonna judge it just yet. So it's asking me which email banner I like the best so that it could export the final PNG. Actually, I don't need it to export. I would say just paste the link to Canva here because I think I like the third one, but I don't like how it's positioned and stuff like that. And it's oftentimes something like that, right? Like you look at the first card from the graphic designer and you have some comments and you want to change it yourself. So here, I'm just gonna, for all 4, right here. Okay, so I'm just gonna reply to it. So you don't actually have to choose one of the 4 options. You can actually type in your own response. So here is actually giving me the link to Canva here. And I think I like the third one. So candidate C, I'm going to open that particular Canva link. This is the one. So, if I don't like, let's say if I want this to be bigger or whatnot, I can actually just edit it directly here instead of chatting with Cowork and asking it to do certain things. Okay, now you have the copies and now you have the banners. You can technically push it onto HubSpot. But unfortunately, currently for HubSpot connectors, there is no option to create a marketing email directly on HubSpot. But all you gotta do now is just paste the copies and take the banner, put it onto the email, and you're good to go to execute it. Of course, if you're using any other CRM, there might be options for you to actually just push it directly onto the CRM and send it for you. All right, so that's workflow 1. And workflow 2 is actually the social media part. So here I'm just going to piggyback on the same project and I'm going to ask, can you create for the first 2 IG posts on Canva for the campaign? Just paste the Canva link here once done. All right, so we're going to let it work and see what it comes back with. Okay, so it looks like it's come back with some of the designs here. All right, so I'm opening this on Cowork right now, but of course I can open it on Canva. Preparing Mother's Day, give buying questions, 3 questions before buying. Let's open it up on Canva so that, because some of it is cut off, so not too sure. And craft it for your sanctuary. All right, brooklyncandle.co. It's not too bad. Of course, this is based on the 4 or 5 images that I'm giving Claude Cowork access to, so it's trying its best. But what I like is it's pasting the right messaging. Let's check out another one. Let's see this one. Okay, give buying questions. So our candle, thoughtfully crafted candle gives. Okay, yeah, so if I want to do any improvements, I can actually do it straight on Canva. Or if it's completely off, of course, I can go back to Cowork and tell it to rework the whole thing. Of course, from here, if you want it to be completely on autopilot, you can actually have it push or post directly to your Instagram through a tool called Blotato. So Blotato is a content auto posting tool. If you haven't used Blotato before, it works really well because there is an MCP connection directly to Claude Cowork. So in this case, you can go to customize and you can go to connectors the same way. And you want to hit the plus sign, but this time you want to add custom connector instead of browse connectors. So here under the name, you want to type in Blotato, and the remote MCP server URL, you want to take it from the Blotato documentation, which is basically this URL right here, which I'll paste down the link description below as well. Essentially, once you add the MCP URL over here, you hit add, what happens again, this becomes a custom connector, and it will give you a pop-up on your browser if you're logged into Blotato just to get you authenticated. So essentially what it can actually do is, for example, I'm asking is what can you do with the Blotato connector now, right? So it's telling me, hey, you can do publishing, you can do scheduling, asset handling. Where this is useful for your Mother's Day campaign is, you see, it can take 18 social posts ready, a Notion calendar, stage them on Blotato, each one the right caption, and you can push directly onto your Instagram without you lifting a finger. You don't even actually have to go to your IG. So all of that can be seamless. I have covered Blotato quite deeply in my previous video, so if you want to check them out, I'll link it right up here and down in the description below. But yeah, it's just one of the tools that are really useful in my opinion. And if you're interested to take Blotato out for a spin, you can use my coupon code MARC20 for 20% off for Blotato. And yeah, see if it's right for you. So finally, I just want to show you guys how the scheduling process all works. You can simply, on the same space right here, tell Cowork in natural language, hey, I'd like you to schedule campaign calendar creation every start of the month. So something like that, and it will know that you're trying to ask it to schedule a task. So it's asking me something about the schedule, and I'm just going to pick recommended for now, new Notion page each month. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to actually put it on schedule. It's just to show how it appears on the schedule page once you've done that. Yep, it's asking me to schedule task now, so I'm going to schedule it. All right, so it's created the schedule task. The first run is on Monday, but every start of the month, it's going to create all these things, does all these tasks. Again, you can have the task as complex or as simple as you want. It could be not just plan the campaign, but come up with the emails, come up with the banners, come up with everything, push it or schedule it through Blotato, share the link of the finished product so that I can review it and comment or approve. So once you schedule your task, it will appear right here. As you can see, this is green. So this is live and active. So you can open up and see what it is, which is the slow hour monthly campaign calendar. I don't really have to wait till the first of the month to run it. I can run it now if I want to. I can hit pause or I can delete it completely if I want to. So last but not least, the ability for Cowork to create high quality results, especially when it comes to marketing, messaging, marketing campaigns, depends on how much it knows about your business, right? So that brings me to the issue of persistent memory. As you can see, the memories in the projects, this is in my local memory, right? So it's only consisting of a few files that I dropped in there. In practice, what you want looks probably something like this, right? A bit more robust, a bit more complex, because you just have so many different files, so many different type of things to put into your business. And the method that I'm using here is Andrej Karpathy's LLM Wiki method, right? So Andrej Karpathy is the head of research in OpenAI. Well, recently he moved to Anthropic. So essentially what he shared was an approach to give AI agent an access to persistent compounding memory. The problem is every time you start a conversation with Cowork or an AI, it usually starts in a blank slate. Even in project, it does remember your memory, but because it's unstructured, it doesn't have a great idea of how to categorize certain things. Like for example, email campaigns or copywriting in a certain space and sales in another space, operations in another, HR, etc. So what we're doing here essentially is building up the directory so that for the LLM, when it tries to answer your questions, there's a very regimented way as it goes through the context memory. So imagine like giving your assistant a notebook to carry around, right? So it goes through the notebook from the schema. So that's why there's always a schema file at the top. So the schema is just a content of what's inside the notebook. Let's say this folder is for marketing, this folder is for sales. So if the conversation is about marketing, you might want to look into the marketing folder, marketing files, and check historically how marketing campaigns have been done, etc. So it knows where to look for the relevant information. And what's interesting is there is this compounding effect of the memories, right? So if you launch a new marketing campaign, it's going to add on to that marketing campaign folder. So it's going to keep learning the way an employee would learn as it goes through the experience. And lastly, it's going to go through a weekly check or lint of scans of your folder structure, make sure that everything is up to date, there are no gaps. And there's this concept of linking the files as well, right? So for example, if you run a Mother's Day campaign, that probably has linkage to both marketing campaign and sales campaign. Maybe a particular product was launched on Mother's Day. So that links to the product files and folders. So that way, it's just like a network of information that the LLM can easily see and find relevance. So that really helps them out a lot. So when you link everything up, it may look something like this, where kind of all these nodes are linked to one another. These are files and folders that are linked in a certain way based on relevance to other folders so that it's easy for the LLMs to go through this. So how do you go about building a directory like this? And by the way, what I'm showing here is a graph view on Obsidian, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But first we should focus on how to build the file repository, right? So luckily it's quite easy to do that. I have shared 3 files in the folder that I'll link below, where there is a prompt that you can put into your Claude instance, right? So if you have a Claude Cowork, a fresh new Claude Cowork project spun up, what you can do is you can drop in the prompt here, copy everything below the line. It's basically asking it to build a persistent wiki-linked knowledge base with a work scope and give you context memory and telling it the architecture to build. But again, this architecture to build is a bit tricky because we don't want to tell it explicitly what to build or hard code it, right? We want to kind of tell it, this is the kind of template that I'm looking at, but the first depending on the business, the first depending on the departments. So I'm not sure what departments or what business you're doing. So that's the reason why we're using a more common template like this, where we allow the LLM to understand your business a little bit more and build the right template, right? So when it's doing, you're building this directory the first time, it's going to ask you a lot of questions like, okay, how does this work? How do you want it to be categorized? How do you want things to be segmentized, right? So you can just take this file and copy the whole thing and just drop it as your first prompt in the project, and it will start building your folders in that manner, right? And so of course I didn't have all of that built up for that particular demo project, but in the other project where it handles my channels and stuff like that, these are the folders and files and schemas that is actually built out. And these are markdown files within the folder. Again, markdown files are just text files in fancy formatting. And that's where Obsidian comes in. Obsidian basically is a free note-taking app that uses markdown file format. And because markdown file format is what all the files are being saved as right now, you can't actually just point Obsidian to that particular folder and it will be able to show you the graph of how it's all interlinked together. So what you can do is go over to obsidian.md. Essentially, you can download Obsidian for your system. And once you do that, you open up a fresh Obsidian vault like this. And don't worry about the namings and stuff like that. It's essentially a representation of the files that you already have. It's nothing fancy. So what you can do is actually go to the bottom left-hand corner over here. And when you click on that, hit on Manage Vaults. And here, you could essentially either create a new vault or open folder as vault, right? So what you want to do is just hit open. And once you do that, you can point it to the folder that you want. And so in this case, I'm going to point it to my Automate with Marc channel, and it's going to create the representation of how the Automate with Marc folder is linked with all the files within the folder, right? So this is the entire thing. And from here, you can see that there are some files that are kind of orphaned. They're not linked to all the other stuff. So you can kind of have the LLM fix that as well, work on the memories. But once it has everything linked up like this, it just makes your entire context memory for the LLM much more robust. It really then understands your brand. And the best thing is its continuous improvement. It's always compounding, building on top of the experience of the task that it's doing. And so once you're done giving it the first prompt, it's going to take a long while, right? It might even run out your token for that day because it's doing a lot in terms of setting it up. You want to go into prompt 2. So this is where you populate your knowledge database understanding system. Prompt 1 is just building the architecture, which is the file directory. These are blank folders. So the prompt 2 is really to populate your knowledge base. This is where you plug in the current repository that you have. And your business typically has its own repository. I'm not sure what it entails, but typically, if you work on Slack, you would have a long chat history on Slack. If you got your email on Gmail, you can connect that as well for it just to scan through your emails to understand the whole history of the business. And if you have your CRM like HubSpot, connect HubSpot and ask it to just scan the entire HubSpot and come up with working knowledge of what that CRM, what your audience looks like. And this is how it's going to populate the system. This is what this prompt is going to do. It's going to just populate that particular architecture with all the working knowledge, all the wisdom of the business that you have. And on top of that, also build wiki links through the file so that it becomes one holistic knowledge base. And while this is one way to have it ingest the information of the business that you have, the other way is actually for you to drop it under the raw folder. So for example, here, I have the raw folder here, which you can just drop in any articles that you see, any business documents that you're going to put in there. Again, all this files and folders are all in your local system. And of course, with Obsidian, there's another way for you to also ingest information is to go to the obsidian.md/clipper. So this is a web clipper, essentially a Chrome extension, right? So you can add it to Chrome and it will show up here in the extension. So essentially what it does, if I go to Medium and I look at this particular article and I want my cowork to understand or remember, what I want to do is just open up the extension here for Obsidian, and I can just clip it over by adding it to Obsidian, and here, open Obsidian. Okay, and what it does is it just automatically adds all this information as part of the MD file within clippings in RAW. Okay, cool. So that's a bit lengthy, but I think the OS part is worth kind of taking your time to set that up, because really the quality and results differs a lot, and it just increases from week to week, right? So even as you set it up the first time, you might feel that like, hey, it's kind of missing certain things. You treat it like an intern. If it makes a mistake, you tell it like, hey, that's wrong and you want to do it this way. And it's going to remember that. Remember, the memory is compounding. And by week 2, you're going to suddenly realize, hey, this system knows almost everything about my business. And so again, the prompt for those and how to use as well, right? I'm dropping that all in the link in the folder down in the description below. I'll also add in a couple skills that you've seen me use in the video and the workflows, like the Canva email skills and IG skills. So that's it. If you have any questions, came into any issues as you're setting this up, please just comment down below. I'll try to respond to you as quickly as possible. But otherwise, if you find videos like these useful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.